The scent of basil and simmering tomatoes usually filled my little kitchen with a sense of calm, a predictable comfort in the middle of a Tuesday. I was humming along to an old Motown hit on the radio, the one about a love like a heat wave, while meticulously layering slices of mozzarella onto a thick slab of sourdough. A late lunch, my favorite kind, with no clock to watch but the slow creep of shadows across the linoleum floor. The sunlight, a warm, buttery yellow, poured through the window over the sink, illuminating the dancing dust motes and the cheerful, slightly chipped ceramic robin I'd had perched there for years. It was just one of those perfectly ordinary, perfectly pleasant afternoons, the kind you tuck away in your memory without even realizing you're doing it. I just sprinkled a bit of oregano on top and was reaching for the olive oil when a shadow fell across the open screen door of my back porch. I paused, hand hovering. I wasn't expecting anyone. My closest friend, Sarah, was in Arizona visiting her grandkids, and my son, Michael, was a state away, busy with his own life. For a split second, a little flutter of unease went through me, just the way the world is these days, you know? But then a voice, hesitant and a little deeper than I remembered, said, "Linda? Mrs. Henderson?" I turned, shielding my eyes against the brighter light from the doorway. Standing there, silhouetted for a moment, was a young man, tall, lanky, with a familiar slope to his shoulders that tugged at a memory. As he stepped further into the porch light, letting the screen door sigh shut behind him, I saw his face more clearly. It was Liam. Liam Peterson from next door. Good heavens, it had been years since I'd seen him properly. Last I recalled, he was a freckle-faced kid with a perpetually skinned knee, always trying to retrieve a wayward baseball from my petunias. Now he was, well, grown. He had to be in his early 20s, I supposed. His sandy blonde hair was longer than the neat cuts his mother, Susan, used to enforce, falling a bit over his forehead. He had the same thoughtful, slightly worried blue eyes I remembered from his childhood, but now they were clouded with something I couldn't quite name. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, looking a little rumpled, like he'd been driving for a while, or maybe hadn't slept too well. "Liam, my goodness, come in," I said, surprise warming my voice. I wiped my hands on my apron, a floral one Michael had given me for Mother's Day years ago. What a surprise. I almost didn't recognize you. He offered a small, shy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, it's been a while." He shuffled his feet a little on the doormat. "Mom and Dad aren't home. I tried their cells, but..." He trailed off, looking a bit lost. "Oh, that's right. I remembered. Susan mentioned they were going up to the lake for a few days. A little anniversary trip. I think. They'd been my neighbors for nearly 30 years, Bill and Susan. Good people, quiet, kept to themselves mostly, but always ready with a friendly wave or a shared cup of sugar if needed." "Oh, right." Liam's shoulders seemed to slump a fraction. He looked around my kitchen, his gaze lingering on the bubbling tomato sauce on the stove, the half-made sandwich on the counter. "Smells good in here." "Just throwing together some lunch," I said, gesturing towards the sourdough. "Running a bit late today. Have you eaten?" It was an automatic offer, the kind you make without thinking. He hesitated, his eyes flicking from the food back to me. Not really. I drove straight through from school." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed more tired than casual. I probably should have called first or waited. Sorry to just show up. "Nonsense, Liam," I said, trying to sound breezy, though a little knot of concern was starting to form in my chest. He seemed adrift. "What are neighbors for? Come on in, sit down. There's plenty." I pulled out one of the wooden chairs from my small kitchen table, the one with the slightly wobbly leg I kept meaning to fix. Unless you're in a rush. He shook his head slowly. No, no rush at all. He walked over and sank into the chair, his movements weary. He placed his hands on the tabletop, and I noticed his knuckles were white where he gripped them together. There was a faint smudge of what looked like grease on his forearm. I turned back to my sandwich, adding a second one to the assembly line. So, school's out for the summer then? I asked, keeping my tone light. I remembered Susan saying he was studying engineering somewhere up north. A good school, she'd said, beaming with pride. Something like that, he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the worn, checkered pattern of the tablecloth. His voice was low, almost a whisper. The silence stretched for a moment, filled only by the gentle sizzle of the sauce and the distant hum of a lawnmower down the street. The cheerful Motown song had ended, and now a slower, more melancholic tune was playing. I found myself watching him instead of the sandwich. His youthful face looked pale, and there were faint shadows under his eyes. This wasn't just a casual drop-in, because his parents weren't home. Something was wrong. The air in my sunny kitchen suddenly felt a little heavier, charged with an unspoken worry. I carefully placed the sandwiches onto plates, the clink of ceramic loud in the quiet room. I wondered what it was he wasn't saying, what had brought him to my door looking like a ship that had lost its anchor. The ordinary Tuesday was rapidly becoming something else entirely. I set a plate in front of him, a generous helping of tomato soup ladled into a bowl beside the grilled cheese, golden and oozing. Here you go, I said softly. It's not fancy, but it's hot. He looked up, and for a fleeting second, I saw that little freckle-faced boy again, the one who used to look at a cookie with such solemn gratitude. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Linda, thank you. Please call me Linda, I said, sitting down opposite him with my own plate. Now, tell me what's on your mind, Liam? You look like you're carrying the weight of the world. I tried to keep my voice gentle, inviting, not prying. The initial surprise of his arrival was now giving way to a genuine concern, the kind a mother feels, or perhaps just a neighbor who's known a kid his whole life. He picked up his spoon, stirring the soup slowly, round and round, as if the answers he was looking for might be found in its crimson depths. The silence hummed, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was going to be more than just a shared lunch. This ordinary afternoon was about to unfold in a way I never could have predicted. He took a tentative bite of the sandwich, then another. He ate slowly at first, then with a little more urgency, as if realizing how hungry he truly was. I just watched him for a moment, letting him eat. Sometimes food is the first step, the easiest way to bridge a gap or soothe a troubled spirit. The basil and tomato, the melted cheese, simple comforts. The sunlight had shifted slightly, now casting longer shadows from the jam jars on the windowsill. The kitchen felt quiet, insulated, like a small, safe harbor. After a few minutes, he put his spoon down and looked at me, his blue eyes still holding that troubled depth. It's about school, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. He picked at a loose thread on the edge of the placemat. I don't think I'm going back. There it was, the first crack in the dam. I leaned back in my chair, my own lunch momentarily forgotten. I didn't gasp or exclaim. I just nodded slowly, trying to convey understanding, or at least a willingness to listen without judgment. Okay, I said, my voice calm and even. Do you want to talk about it? He looked up at me, then a flicker of something. Surprise? Relief? In his eyes. It was as if he'd expected a different reaction, perhaps a lecture, or the kind of well meaning but ultimately dismissive advice adults sometimes dole out. I remembered being his age, how monumental every decision felt, how terrifying it was to disappoint the people you loved. I don't know if I can explain it right, he said, his gaze dropping back to the table. It's not for me. All those equations, the labs, it feels like I'm trying to fit into a box that's way too small, or maybe the wrong shape altogether. He sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to come from deep within him. Everyone's so proud, you know? Mom and dad, all their friends. Liam's going to be an engineer. It's like a title I've been given, and I'm supposed to just wear it whether it fits or not. I thought of my own son, Michael. He'd gone through a phase in college, wanting to drop out of his business program to become a musician. I remembered the panic I'd felt, the late night talks, the worry that he was throwing his future away. But I'd also tried, really tried, to listen. In the end, he'd found a compromise, a way to integrate his passion into a more conventional path. But Liam seemed different. This wasn't a whim. This felt deeper, more fundamental. It takes a lot of courage to admit something like that. Liam, I said softly, especially when you feel like you're letting people down. He looked up sharply, his eyes wide. You think so? I know so, I affirmed, meeting his gaze. It's far easier to just go along with things, to follow the path everyone expects. To question that path, to even consider stepping off it, that's brave. A faint flush crept up his neck. He picked up his sandwich again, but didn't take a bite. I haven't told them yet. Mom and Dad. I mean, I drove here instead. I guess, I guess I just needed to not be there. At school. And I couldn't face telling them over the phone. He swallowed hard. I feel like such a failure. Oh, Liam, I said, my heart aching for him. Changing your mind, realizing something isn't right for you, that's not failure. That's discovery. It's learning who you are. I paused, then decided to share a little piece of my own story. You know, I wanted to be an artist when I was young. I was all set to go to art school. My parents, bless their hearts, were terrified. They wanted something more stable for me. So, I studied to be a teacher instead. He looked at me, really looked at me, his brow furrowed. You were a teacher? For a little while, I said with a small smile. And I liked it, parts of it. But that little artist inside me, she never really went away. I still paint, in my spare time. It's not a career, but it's a part of me. Sometimes our paths aren't straight lines. Sometimes they curve and loop, and sometimes we have to backtrack a little to find the right direction. He was listening intently, his earlier tensions seeming to ease just a fraction. He took a deep breath. What if I don't know what the right direction is? What if I just feel lost? The vulnerability in his voice was palpable. It hung in the warm kitchen air, fragile and real. This was the heart of it. This was why he'd appeared on my doorstep, looking like a storm-tossed bird. He wasn't just running from a course of study. He was adrift in the vast ocean of his own future, with no land in sight. And in that moment, my ordinary kitchen, with its simmering sauce and dusty robin, felt like it had become a lighthouse, a small beacon in his confusion. I knew this conversation was far from over, and I knew I had to choose my next words very carefully. This young man wasn't just my neighbor's son anymore. He was a soul searching for a bit of guidance, and somehow he'd come to me. The weight of that, the unexpected responsibility, settled upon me not as a burden, but as a quiet privilege. The aroma of basil and tomato now mingled with something far more complex, the scent of unfolding trust. I let his question hang in the air for a moment, giving it the space it deserved. Feeling lost is a perfectly normal part of finding your way. Liam, I said, my voice gentle. I think everyone feels that way at some point, probably more often than we admit. The trick isn't to have all the answers right away, but to be brave enough to keep asking the questions. He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. He finally took another bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. The simple act of him eating, of accepting the nourishment I'd offered, felt like a small victory, a sign that he was at least partially grounded in the present moment. My dad, he's an engineer, Liam said, his voice quiet. He loves it. He sees the world in terms of how things work, how they fit together. He's always been so sure of everything. I always thought I should be like that, too. We all want to make our parents proud. I acknowledged. And it's natural to look up to them, to want to follow in their footsteps, especially if you admire them. But you're not your dad, Liam. You're you. You have your own way of seeing the world, your own things that will make your heart sing. I smiled a little. And sometimes those things are very different from what our parents envision for us. Not because they're wrong, but because we're different people. I thought about Bill, his precise garden, his meticulously organized garage. He was a good man, steady and reliable. It was easy to see how a son might feel the pressure to emulate that kind of certainty. What if I don't know what makes my heart sing? He asked, the question almost a whisper, laced with a genuine bewilderment that tugged at me. What if I'm just not good at anything special? Oh, I highly doubt that, Liam, I said, with more conviction than I perhaps even realized I felt. Sometimes our talents are quieter, less obvious. Not everyone is meant to build bridges or design skyscrapers. Some people are meant to connect with others or create beauty in small ways or understand the complexities of the human heart. I paused, searching for the right words. What did you enjoy doing when you were little, before you had to start thinking about careers, and what was sensible? He looked a little surprised by the question. He frowned in concentration, his gaze drifting towards the window, towards the old oak tree in my backyard. I I used to like drawing, he said, a hesitant note in his voice, as if admitting a secret. And I loved taking things apart to see how they worked, not always putting them back together so well, he added with a faint, self deprecating smile. Drove my mom crazy. Drawing? I echoed, a little spark of interest lighting up inside me. What kind of things did you draw? Anything really? People mostly. Animals. I used to try and capture, I don't know, how they looked when they were moving or how they felt. It sounds silly. He ducked his head a little. It doesn't sound silly at all, Liam, I said warmly. It sounds like you have an artist's eye, an observer's heart. And that curiosity about how things work, that's a wonderful trait. It doesn't just apply to machines. It can apply to people, to stories, to life itself. He was quiet for a long moment, tracing the rim of his soup bowl with his finger. The only sounds were the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the distant chirp of a blue jay. The initial tension in the room had largely dissipated, replaced by a thoughtful quiet. It felt like we were in a little bubble, temporarily shielded from the demands and expectations of the outside world. I took an elective last semester, he said finally, his voice a little stronger. Photography, just for fun, really, to fill a credit. He looked up at me, a new light flickering in his eyes. I loved it, Linda. I really loved it. Being in the darkroom, watching the images appear. It felt like magic. His words came a little faster now, a hint of enthusiasm creeping in. And I think I might be kind of good at it. A genuine smile spread across my face. Well, now, that sounds like something, doesn't it? I said gently, that sounds like a spark. He nodded, a hopeful expression dawning on his face, though it was still tinged with uncertainty. But it's photography. It's not engineering. It's not stable. It's not what anyone expects. Expectations. I sighed, leaning back. They can be such heavy blankets, can't they? Sometimes they keep us warm, but sometimes they just smother us. I met his gaze directly. Liam, whose life are you living? Yours, or the one you think other people have mapped out for you? He didn't answer immediately. He picked up his glass of water, took a long drink, his eyes thoughtful. The weight of my question seemed to settle between us, profound and undeniable. Outside, a cloud must have passed over the sun, because the light in the kitchen dimmed for a moment, casting his face in shadow. It made him look older, more serious. The boy was gone, and a young man grappling with one of life's biggest questions sat before me. The journey into this unexpected, deep conversation felt like we were navigating a winding river, each bend revealing a new perspective, a new emotional landscape. And I had a feeling we were approaching a significant turn. Liam set the water glass down with a quiet thud. I guess I've always tried to do what was expected, he admitted, his voice low and earnest. Be the good son, the smart kid, get the good grades, go to the right school. I thought that was the way to be. Happy, or at least to make everyone else happy. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Turns out, it just made me feel like an imposter. That's a very honest thing to say, I replied, acknowledging the rawness of his admission. And it's a very common feeling, I think. We all wear masks from time to time. The trick is not to forget who's underneath. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Your parents, Liam, they love you. I know they do. Bill and Susan are good people. They want you to be happy and successful. But maybe, just maybe, their definition of success, or the path they imagine for you, isn't the only one. And maybe deep down, all they truly want is for you to be genuinely happy, to be fulfilled, even if it's not in the way they initially pictured. He listened intently, his blue eyes fixed on mine. The earlier cloud of worry hadn't entirely lifted, but there was a new openness in his expression, a willingness to consider possibilities he might have dismissed before. It's just telling them, he said, the anxiety returning to his voice. The thought of that conversation, it terrifies me, disappointing them. I understand that fear, I said softly. Truly, I do. But what if you're underestimating them? What if they're more understanding than you think? Parents have a way of surprising us. Their love for their children often runs deeper and is more flexible than we give them credit for. I thought of my own moments of doubt with Michael, the times I'd had to adjust my own expectations, and how ultimately our relationship had deepened because of it. And what's the alternative, Liam? To continue down a path that makes you feel like an imposter? How long can anyone sustain that before something breaks? He winced, as if my words had struck a little too close to home. Not much longer, I guess, he conceded. That's why I'm here, at your kitchen table, instead of in a thermodynamics lecture. He managed a weak smile. Well, I'm glad you are, I said, returning the smile. My grilled cheese sandwiches might not solve all your problems, but my kitchen is always open for a chat. I looked at his now empty plate. More soup? Another sandwich. He shook his head. No, thank you, Linda. I'm full. It was really good. Thank you. There was a sincerity in his voice that warmed me. It wasn't just about the food. It was about the space, the listening ear, the shared moment of quiet understanding. So, photography, I said, steering the conversation back gently. What kind of pictures do you like to take? You said you liked drawing people, their expressions, how they felt. His face lit up again. That spark I'd noticed earlier growing a little brighter. Yeah, exactly. Portraits mostly, candid shots, trying to capture a moment, a real emotion, not just pose smiles. He hesitated, then reached for his backpack, which he'd left near the door. He rummaged inside for a moment and pulled out a worn, leather bound journal. It looked more like a sketchbook than a traditional diary. I, uh, I started carrying this around, he said, a little shyly. It's not much, but he opened it and carefully turned it around for me to see. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a sketch. It was a photograph tucked into the pages. A stunning black and white portrait of an old man sitting on a park bench. His face a roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes looking off into the distance with a profound sadness, yet also a quiet dignity. The play of light and shadow was exquisite. It wasn't just a picture, it was a story. Liam, I whispered, genuinely moved. This is beautiful. Truly. A slow blush spread across his cheeks. You think so? I know so, I said, my gaze still fixed on the photograph. You have a gift, Liam, a real gift. This isn't just something you're kind of good at. This is talent. I looked up at him, seeing him now not just as the worried young man, but as an artist, someone with a unique way of seeing and capturing the world. This is that spark. And it's not just a spark, Liam. It's a flame. He looked down at the photograph, then back at me, and for the first time since he'd walked into my kitchen, I saw a genuine, unclouded smile light up his face. It transformed him, chasing away the shadows. It was the smile of someone who has been seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in a long while. And in that moment, the emotional depth of our unexpected encounter crystallized. It wasn't just about a career choice anymore. It was about identity, about courage, about the quiet, profound human need to be understood and validated. The simple act of making lunch had somehow unlocked a space for honesty and revelation, and my little kitchen had become a sanctuary. The realization of what was happening, the sheer, unexpected intimacy of it, settled over me with a sense of awe. Liam carefully closed the journal, the smile still lingering on his lips. Thank you, Linda, he said, his voice filled with a quiet emotion that resonated deeply within me. No one's ever reacted like that. To my pictures, I mean, or to me, wanting to do something like this. Well, maybe they just haven't seen them properly. I replied gently. Or maybe they haven't seen how much it means to you. I leaned forward a little, my hands clasped on the table. Liam, that photograph, it has heart. It tells a story. That's a rare thing. Engineering is a fine profession, a noble one, building things that last. But capturing a human soul, a fleeting moment of truth, like you did there, that's a different kind of building, a different kind of lasting. He seemed to be mulling over my words, his gaze distant for a moment, as if he were looking at his own future through a new lens. The kitchen was quiet again, but it was a comfortable silence now, filled with understanding rather than unspoken anxieties. The afternoon sun, which had been playing hide and seek with the clouds, now streamed in with renewed warmth, bathing the room in a soft, golden glow. It felt almost symbolic, like a clearing after a storm. I have a few more in here, he said, tapping the journal. If you'd like to see them, there was a vulnerability in his offer, a tentative hope that made my heart swell a little. I would love to, Liam, I said, my voice sincere. He opened the journal again, and for the next half hour or so, he showed me his photographs. They were mostly portraits, as he'd said. An elderly woman laughing, her eyes crinkling at the corners. A child looking up at a street performer with pure, unadulterated wonder. A musician lost in his music, his fingers a blur on the strings of a guitar. Each one was more than just a picture. It was a glimpse into a life, a captured emotion. He didn't have many, perhaps a dozen or so that he deemed worthy of sharing, but each one was powerful. He spoke a little about each person, where he'd taken the photo, what had drawn him to them. His voice, which had been so hesitant and worried when he first arrived, was now animated, infused with a quiet passion. I listened, truly listened, offering a comment here and there, but mostly just letting him share his world with me. I saw the way his eyes lit up when he talked about catching the right light, or the challenge of getting someone to relax enough to show their true self to the camera. It was clear this wasn't just a hobby, it was a calling, something that resonated deep within his being. These are remarkable. Liam, I said when he finally closed the journal, you have a genuine talent, a way of connecting with people and seeing them, truly seeing them. He looked down, a pleased but still slightly shy expression on his face. It's what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing, he said softly. When I'm behind the camera, everything else just fades away. All the worries, the expectations. It's just me and that moment. Then that's what you need to hold on to. I told him, that feeling, that's your compass, Liam. That's what will guide you, even when the path isn't clear or easy. He nodded, taking a deep breath. So, what do I do now? He asked, the practicalities of his situation resurfacing. About mom and dad? About everything? Well, I began, choosing my words carefully. First, you breathe. You've made a huge realization today, and that takes time to settle. As for your parents, I think you need to talk to them. Honestly, openly. Show them your photographs. Show them your passion, just like you showed me. I paused. It might not be an easy conversation. They might be disappointed or worried at first. That's natural, but they're your parents. They love you. Give them a chance to understand, to see this new path you're discovering. What if they don't? He asked, the fear still a shadow in his eyes. Then you keep showing them, I said firmly but kindly. You live your truth, Liam, respectfully, lovingly, but you live it. Sometimes it takes time for people we love to adjust their dreams for us, to see us for who we truly are becoming, not just who they thought we would be. You might need to find a way to support yourself while you pursue this, to show them you're serious, that this isn't just a whim. Maybe you could even find a way to combine your engineering mind with your artistic eye. There are technical aspects to photography, I'm sure. He considered this. I suppose so. The equipment, the lighting, the composition, there's a science to it, as well as an art. A small smile played on his lips. Maybe I'm not throwing everything away after all. Exactly, I said, relieved to see that glimmer of optimism. You're redirecting your energies, your talents. It's a pivot, not a full stop. He sat there for a moment, looking more at peace than he had all afternoon. The tension had drained from his shoulders, and his eyes, while still thoughtful, no longer held that haunted look. He seemed lighter. Finally, he stood up. I should probably, I don't know, think. Maybe try calling mom and dad again. See when they'll be back. That sounds like a good plan, I said, rising with him. I walked him to the screen door. The afternoon was beginning to wane, the shadows lengthening across my small yard. The scent of my roses, just beginning to bloom by the porch steps, drifted in. He paused at the door, turning back to me. Linda, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I I don't know how to thank you. You have no idea how much this afternoon has meant to me. Oh, Liam, I said, my own eyes feeling a little misty. You did all the hard work. All I did was make some lunch and listen. You did a lot more than that, he insisted. You listened without judging. You saw me, and you gave me hope, I guess. He shuffled his feet. It's more than anyone else has done. I reached out and gently squeezed